So I would like to welcome everyone to the Latinx Faculty Talk on Latinx Student Success. Just to go over what our event will look like today. First, I will introduce our phenomenal panelists. Then they will take a little time to speak about their academic journey. And finally, they will be each asked a series of questions, which will allow them to elaborate a little bit more about their personal journeys, how they navigated graduate school, and how they're able to be successful in academia. If you have any specific questions for the panelists, please add them to the comment box and make sure it is sent privately to Erwin to make sure we don't clutter the comment box. Also, please list the speaker you would like to direct the question to specifically. Now, without further ado, we'd like to introduce our first speaker of the day. Dr. Rodriguez is an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and a current Woodrow Wilson Career Enhancement Fellow. She specializes in the area of immigration and citizenship, Latinx sociology, family, race, and gender. Currently, she is working on a book project that centers on how members of Mexican mixed status families experience belonging and managing illegality in their lives. Dr. Rodriguez has received accolades from the Society for the Study of Social Problems, the Eastern Sociological Society, and grant funding from the University of Michigan's National Center for Institutional Diversity. Her research has been published in top sociology and interdisciplinary journals, including the Journal of Marriage and Family and Sociology of Race and Ethnicity. Dr. Rodriguez's current project is titled Viva Mariachi, Student Musicians Crafting Culture, Educational Resilience, and Resistance in Las Vegas. Dr. Rodriguez is a proud Chicana from San Fernando Valley and the first in her family to attend and graduate from college. These days, much of her time is dedicated to finishing her first book, watching and recommending TV programs, and being a dog mom to her golden retriever, Bento. Welcome, Dr. Rodriguez. You may have the floor.
Thank you, Celine, for that. Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to share space and be in community with all of you in this safe manner. And it's so good to see new and familiar faces. So when Celine asked me to share some thoughts, of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I'm so glad that this organization has been founded, and it ties into some of my consejos about creating community and friendship. So this is really a wonderful thing. So we were asked to talk about our experiences in graduate school and after, a little bit about how to be maybe successful in academia and to share consejos. The only way I know how to do this is really to tell that story of how I'm here, how I went to graduate school, what happened after. And along the way, I hope some of this is in any way helpful. But as Celine mentioned, I was a first generation college student. And the only reason why I'm talking to you all today and a professor today is because I was an undeclared major in undergraduate. I went to CSU Northridge, and again, first generation college student trying to find my path. I knew I wanted a college degree. I knew I wanted a professional career, but I really had no idea what that would look like. And I didn't have a lot of mentors or neighbors or family friends or family who could open up windows or open up an idea of what a medical career could be, a legal career, accounting, etc. And so when I took a Chicano Studies class with Dr. Mary Pardo, who is just a fantastic Chicana feminist, and this was at the end of my second year, I felt like my mind was just completely opened. Up until that point, my classes really hadn't made an impact on me. Who knows if I would have finished school? I was feeling a little lost at the time. And I took her class and I felt like I developed this consciousness I just didn't have before. And I suddenly had in front of me a scholar, a very powerful feminist who I thought, wow, I would like to be in front of the classroom. I would like to assign these kinds of works. I would like to read more of these kinds of books. And so, the class was about feminist politics globally and what, then was called the Third World, and about Chicana issues. And from that point on, I just thought, wow, I really need to go to graduate school if I want to be a professor. and learned along the way. So I made it from, Southern California, 300,000 miles away. I made it to UMass Amherst, which is in Western Massachusetts. I was born and raised in Southern California. I went to an HSI for my undergraduate degree, and I very quickly found myself in a state that is predominantly white and in an institution that's also predominantly white. A few people of color, a few Latinos, and even actually fewer Chicanos, Chicanas, and Mexicanos, Mexicanas. And so luckily I was ready for the challenge and I was ready for the new experience. But I'll tell you what worked. The reason why I think my graduate experience was a productive one and more or less a healthy one, probably not as much, I guess, violence in terms of microaggressions, right? Started when I took a class. My very first elective class was with a woman of color who was teaching a race course, and it really shaped the course of my career. I had wanted to study immigrant workers, and that's why I went to that program to study work and occupations. And then I took Dr. Branch's race course, and I thought, oh my goodness, I think I want to be a race scholar. And that's where some of my research agenda really sort of was born. A paper was born out of that class. And the community in that class would help me generate friendships and help me generate a really nice mentoring relationship with Dr. Branch. And I think that made a big difference. So when I took classes afterwards, where I was maybe experiencing microaggressions or was a little bit more hostile, at least I had started my graduate career with that really powerful course. And so yeah, mostly my experiences were positive. And when they weren't, I had a community of friends and mentors who were there to sort of have my back. Mind you, I know I don't have an accent. I'm not a international student. I'm light skinned. So obviously all these things play into whether or not or how I experience microaggressions. But those were some key things. I will share, when things didn't go right, I just kind of tried to get through it. I was taking a writing class that was required where we all had to share our writing with the class. And this was a core class for sociology. And every time we'd read a peer's paper, it was really about writing style. But the professor in that class took a huge issue with the content of what I was arguing, which wasn't sort of the norm. And it was not a really good experience, but another student of color sort of had my back throughout that whole process. And I just, again, tried to get through it. And later I found ways to really affirm that, that paper wasn't trash, in other words, or to put it in that way. So let me tell you some of the things. I talk a lot about creating friendships and creating community because I do think that's really key. And right off the bat, I had created sort of a community of folks that were mostly of color. Mind you, not mostly or hardly Latinx, because that's just where there weren't a lot of us at UMass. And sometimes where there were, again, not all Latinos have the same politics in mind, right? So I wasn't the only Latinx person in my cohort, but the other Latinx person maybe had very different politics, very different goals in terms of social justice, and we actually had very little in common. So it's funny how that kind of turns out. But one thing we did in terms of creating community is we, and it wasn't my initiation, but at some point, I think it was my second year, another fellow graduate student in a different department had been trying to create a graduate student of color association on campus for some time. And it wasn't until, when I had arrived, there was a bit more of a critical mass of students of color. And so at some point, we were able to generate some interest from the administration to sort of actually get this organization going. Previous to, I guess, my arrival, the leader of this group was kind of on her own, and she was not even in sociology, and she was trying to get faculty in her department to back this up, and it just was not happening. So eventually, we created the GSCA, the Graduate Students of Color Association. A few sociology students were behind this. Manisha Gupta, who was in psychology at the time, was really leading this effort. And we were able to get a lot of students across campus to go to these types of panels, social events, award events, to create a networking system for graduate students of color. Again, in a space where there were so few of us in a town and in a state where there's just, we're few and far between. And so that was really wonderful. Now, the challenges with that, and I'm not sure if this will happen with this organization, is once it becomes less grassroots, then the administration has, they start funding things, and then they have more of a say in the direction of the org, or you start to lose a little bit of something, whether that's power, a little bit of that little magic, or that that organic power. There was a little bit of that lost, but overall, I think the organization did really well, and I believe still continues. I haven't checked lately, but it was a really good thing that we did. I don't know if a lot of you are away from your families as you pursue your graduate education here at UNLV. I felt homesick every sort of 12th and 13th week at UMass, but other students were in the same boat with me, and we tended to bond together, especially that first year. So that's a little bit of my graduate experience. I want to tell you what became more challenging after was actually, and surprisingly, after 4 years there, I went to California to do my dissertation. And, that's a sort of return home, but it wasn't quite a return home in the sense that, life goes on, and so much had changed in 4 years in terms of my personal networks and my family and so much more. And I had changed as a person too. And so in terms of challenges, all of the sort of family, or I don't want to say it's cultural, but all the sort of family obligations that I've managed to sort of avoid became more of a thing when I had to go do my dissertation in California. And then I also lost that community of graduate students that I held so dear when I was at UMass. And so suddenly I was this graduate student in California trying to explain to the people around me why I was always away, why I was always trying to work at Starbucks and writing and doing things like that. So let me tell you about consejos, because I think I'd love to share what I've learned along the way, and especially because I found that being, again, a first-generation college student, I constantly had to sort of maybe catch up and learn things later in the game. And so, one thing I want to encourage you all to think about your graduate education as not necessarily you being a student, but as you being a scholar in training. If your goal is in fact to get a tenure track job, or you want to pursue academia after this, I really encourage you to think of yourself as a scholar who's developing their career. And I say this because, as you know, the graduate path is so different than the undergraduate path, right? And so I want you to think about, if you can, the careers you want, and then often work backwards to create whether the CV or the portfolio you need to get that career. And you do that in conversations with your mentors, and asking lots of questions. Am I on track? Do I need the things? Do I have the things that I need to be competitive? Where are the gaps in my CV? I was often asking that question of my mentors. Where are the gaps in my CV? Where do I need to pay attention to get that tenure track job? And so there's that, right? Talking to your mentors, but also tapping into your research skills and looking at, well, if you can think of a job you want already, or somebody who recently got that job, look at their CV, do a little bit of research and see what they had when they applied. Take a look at, where they are publishing, or if they're publishing, maybe the awards they applied to, the fellowship opportunities, what have they been up to? And you can use them as your models in some ways. And so that's one of my main consejos. And also take care of yourself along the way. Watch for burnout. This is a long career. Graduate training is a long process. Being on the tenure track is a long process. So pay attention to your bodily cues when you need to rest. We're nothing without our health. And so having been around a lot of successful people who are also women of color and often very, very ill, I gotta say, please, please, please take care of yourself, and know that, especially now with this panel, we're here to help guide and answer the questions when it comes to this important chapter in your life. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. We appreciate the time and your words. It's like I'm a graduate student myself, so I totally understand and I kind of relate to what you're saying. So I'm taking all this in. I'm just like, oh my God, this is really, really great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and you being here today. Now, moving to our next speaker, Dr. Marun. Dr. Marun is an assistant professor of cultural studies in international education and multicultural education in the Department of Teaching and Learning at UNLV. She identifies as Latina, Chicana, Mexicana, and her pronouns are her, she, ella. She was born in Durango, Mexico, but grew up in San Francisco Bay Area. She is the first of her in her family to earn a high school diploma, a college degree, and advanced degrees. She earned her doctorate in educational policy studies with a focus on Latina, Latino, and Latinx studies from the University of Illinois in Urbana, Champaign. Before joining UNLV, she was a postdoctoral associate of the program in education at Duke University. She co-coordinated she co-coordinates the Center of Multicultural Education, and her research and teaching focuses on critical multicultural education, critical race theory, Latina, Latino, Latinx educational issues, Chicana, Latina feminisms, recruiting, and retaining students of color along the PK20 educational pipeline. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Marun. You may have the floor.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Irvin, I sent you a slide. I don't know if you could pull it up because I'm not very familiar with WebEx. I sent it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I should be able to pull it up. 1 second.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really happy to be here this morning with all of you. And just to share, my experience, I was thinking this morning, I think through my graduate school, I really never was in the presence of other, my identity as a woman of color has really impacted my educational experiences. And I was never part of a panel or participated in a panel around women of color until I think at the end of my master's program. So I'm really happy that this has that this was created, that this space was created for everyone.
Dr. Maru, I'm sorry to interrupt. I received the email, but it was a blank slide.
Oh, okay. All right. That's okay. Well,
or if you like to share your screen at the bottom, there is a share button. You can share the screen and then stop sharing. That'll be on the top of the screen if you like to do that.
Oh, okay. Let's see. At the very top. Okay. Yeah, I can't see. Oh, I see. I got it. Let me try to pull it up. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry about that. I see it won't let me pull my.
Gotcha, because you can move the whatever you want to share to in front of the chat boxes, because that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing everybody's faces and everything, everybody's videos.
Okay, that's okay. I don't want to hold up too much, but anyways, I was gonna start with sharing a picture of my sister, little kids, and I always like to share that picture of my sister and my brother. So I'm the youngest of three, and I like to start with them because I think it's really important to acknowledge that within our own families, we have such diverse educational trajectories. My oldest sister, she never graduated from high school. She's still undocumented. My brother also never graduated from high school. He ended up in prison for 6 years, and then was later murdered during at the time when the drug cartel was really strong in Mexico. And I like to share that because when I teach a course on Latinos in education, I always ask my students, why is it that I made it? Was I smarter than my siblings? And, because that's the narrative that we often hear, right? Like, oh, well, some students just care more about school than others, right? But we all love school. We all loved going to school. There was a love for learning in our family, but unfortunately, right, zip codes determine what kind of access, what kind of experiences you have in school, the types of opportunities you have. And unfortunately, long story short, I was able to migrate to the US at the age of 7 with my mother and was later adopted. And so that gave me access to my documentation from becoming undocumented to documented. So it's really important, right, that our identities as Latinx students and community members, our identities are so complex, right? And it's really important to understand that I think one of the most frustrating parts about being in higher ed is like, oh, well, if you made it, why can't all these other community members make it, right? But I think we are not the exception, right? We've made it, but there's still so many within our own families who have not made it, and that's not okay. And so that's really what drives me to be in these spaces, right? Because I want to see more of my cousins, my primos. I want to see all my family members at least graduate high school, right? Like that's not asking a lot. So just a little bit about me. I grew up, so I said I was born in Durango, Mexico, migrated when I was 8 years old, didn't speak English, was placed in, back then it was ESL. I somehow learned, English pretty quickly by watching Sesame Street and other cartoons. Grew up, I went to bilingual school in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so, I had all these things against me, right? I was undocumented. I was an English language learner. My family was split, right? I was part of the, family separation where one sibling's here, one's another because of finances and legality issues. But there were always teachers, right, that really cared, right, that took the time. There were always community members who showed me love. There were my elders who really took the time to say, look, you can do anything, right? And we're here to support you. So I always want to acknowledge, right, my community and my family who were my first educators. And I think it's important that we never forget that, right? Like they invested in us, right? And once we get to higher ed, we can't forget about that and just turn our backs like, I made it, I'm out. You can't, right? So similar to Dr. Cassandra's story, I ended up at San Jose State University. Again, like so many first generation students, I was applying to college by myself, didn't really know. My dream was to go to one of the UCs, but because I didn't understand how financial aid worked, I had gotten accepted to some UCs, but ended up at San Jose State because I could commute, similar to UNLV, right? A commuter campus. I could still live from home. And similar to Dr. Cassandra's story, it wasn't until I took Chicano studies that I realized that I had something to contribute, that I realized that I was smart enough as my other peers, right? And it was from there, from taking Chicano studies, where I became a McNair scholar and was part of the program. And that program really opened up my eyes. Before joining the program, I was a sociology major with a minor in criminology. And so many of my cousins and extended family members were in prison that I wanted to be a probation officer because I wanted to help my people in my community. But I had a great professor that said, you should really find out what a probation officer does. And I met with a probation officer and I realized, well, maybe this is not for me. And then that's how I learned about, you can become a professor or you can read and write. But nobody told me that it was going to take this long. So I feel like I got lied to. It's like Dr. Cassandra mentioned, this is a really, really long journey, right? So, I mean, you have to be really strong to make it through all these, all these different ups and downs. So from San Jose, I ended up at the University of Utah and got my master's there, and then ended up at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I ended up majoring in educational policy studies. But there are the couple of things I want to discuss about my journey. One, we need to really unpack imposter syndrome, right? I hear that a lot. I hear that often from mostly students of color, right? We need to unpack that and understand, what does that really mean, right? And unpacking it, right? And does it mean that you're not smart enough? Absolutely not. It does not mean you're smart enough. Does it mean you're struggling? Yeah, we all struggle, right? We struggle, but what resources, what support do I need so that I don't feel, so I can get unstuck from feeling that way, right? Or I hear students saying, oh, well, I'm just not a good writer. Well, name one person who's born a great writer, right? Nobody's born a good writer. Everyone struggles with writing. If they say they don't, they're lying. Everyone struggles with writing, but you know how you get better at writing? By working at it, right? It's our craft. And if you don't like writing and reading, then you better love it, because that's the rest of your career. So, I just ask that you really, take a deeper look at, like, when you say I have imposter syndrome, what are you really saying and what do you really need? Coursework, I would say, I think it's really easy as graduate students, like, oh, we feel really safe in our department or in our program. It's really important that you take courses outside your department. So when I was a student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I ended up taking classes in sociology and anthropology and gender and women's studies and family studies. I was all over the place, and it was one of the best experiences because I knew the conversations that were happening in anthropology. I knew that I can hang with, like, students in sociology, right? And I knew I can hang, and that's how I became an interdisciplinary scholar, right? That you understand the conversations, the arguments, the research that's coming out of those different fields, right? Because unfortunately, for a lot of us who do the research that we do, it tends to be very interdisciplinary, and it's really important that you get the training to be able to, like, once you're out there, like, it's like, oh, you didn't quote so-and-so, like, oh, okay, well, then you don't really know about sociology, or you don't really know about anthropology. So I would strongly encourage you all to just, like, push yourself to take courses outside your department. Read everything, right? Like, you're in grad school, read everything. If you're not reading everything, then you need to make time, right? Read the footnotes, look up the authors, right? Like, where did they go to school? Where are they publishing? Look at their CVs, right? Study them, right? And, like, if you're not reading everything, trust me, it's going to catch up to you. And it's not fun. When you think, the second point I wanted to talk about was your research. When you're thinking about, okay, what do I want my dissertation to be on? You're going to have competing, maybe, advice by saying, oh, you need to focus on this topic because this is really hot and this is what's going to get you a job. Don't do that. Don't do that. Write about what matters to you, right? Because as Dr. Cassandra mentioned, it's a long journey. And if you get tired of what you're writing, that's not good, right? So write about something that matters to you, right? And even if people will say, well, you're not going to get a job if you write about that. Trust me, someone will give you a job. It might take a little bit longer, but that's okay, right? Because you're doing something that you love. And then lastly, when it comes to mentoring, my consejo around mentoring, don't rely on your advisor for everything. You want to expand your network, right? So So just look at, okay, so I don't want to be ableist, right? But if we look at our, like your fingers, 5 people, right? Or write down 5 people that you can call for writing, for your mental health, for professional advice, someone to have fun with, right? Or just someone to talk about, you know, your love life, right? Whatever it is, right? Because you don't want to talk to your advisor about your love life. I mean, some advisors are cool with that, but you want to be like, your advisor is not your everything. We're here to support you, but you also need to build your own network, right? Your own support network, your own comunidad of like, okay, I have this, you know, I'm stuck on this writing project. I know who I can call to give me some help with this writing project. Or, you know, like my partner just broke up with me. Like, who can I call when I'm like, you know, going through this breakup, whatever it is, right? So yeah, so just, you know, take care of yourself and expand your network and build those relationships. Those relationships it's everything. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. A lot of that resonated with me. The idea of writing something that is important to you, it took me a while to not be afraid to do that. So thank you so, so much. Up next, we would like to have Dr. Bautista. So Dr. Bautista has built an international and national reputation for her pioneering work on treatment technologies to remove the contaminant perchlorate from waters using both physiochemical and biological methods. At the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where Dr. Bautista has been a member of the civil and environmental engineering faculty since 1997, she has attracted millions of dollars in research funding. Welcome, Dr. Bautista. You may have the floor.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, and it was very interesting to listen to what the other faculty has to say. My journey, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so my journey is a bit different. I was mentioning that to our provost another day. So I was not born in the United States, like many faculty members in STEM in the US. I came from another country. I came from Brazil. So when I arrived here, I already had a college degree. It doesn't mean that it was easy to get it, and I will go over that in a little bit. But I don't think that my experience is the same as many people who are born here had. And I think it's the same for many people. And, you know, every time, you know, when I am, you know, people say, oh, you are a Latinx faculty member. Okay, maybe I am, but I didn't have the same experience that a student that went through the US life had. But you know, still, I came from a very poor background, as I'm going to relate to you. I was also the first one to graduate from college in my family. When I graduated from Penn State with my PhD, they have an exit interview. And I had another friend from Brazil, Jose. We graduated the same day. He graduated from mechanical and graduated from civil. So one of the question is, what is the highest education level of your grandfather, your mother? And ours was like less than high school, 3rd grade. And we knew we are going to be outliers. And we said, we just screw Penn State statistics, you know, because it was the case, because we didn't have that. But I think back to my point of not having the same experience, it does mean that I am unable to sympathize or help minority students. Indeed, I'm going to show you that that's what I do 80% of my time. But is, you know, I think it's important that UNLV recognize the differences if they want to be effective in helping the minority students. You see, UNLV didn't plan to be a minority institution. UNLV became a minority institution by design because the Latino population came here. So, and that's why we are not very effective yet, because we have to recognize that. And many people don't like talking about that, but I talk to even to the president about that. You have to see the difference, because we didn't plan for it, and that's why we don't have infrastructure to guarantee the success yet. So we have to build that. We got, by God, if you would, by design, by the community, a minority institution. Now we have to deal with it, and we have to build the infrastructure to make sure the students are successful. So my journey is one of a poor student. So I was born in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil. Indeed, I was born in the poorest region of Brazil. This is what my hometown looks like today. This picture I took 2 years ago, and it was even smaller. There was no high school. So when I was 13 years old, I had saved enough money to move to the next town, and I passed this big stone. It's called the point of no return. So if you go in the road and you pass this, you never come back, because the place was so bad. And I love this stone, by the way. But I had to move, 13 years old. I work in a supermarket, in a pharmacy, and I saved my money. And I had enough money to study for 6 months. It was a private high school, a Catholic high school. And my mother asked me how I'm going to pay for the other months. I said, I'm going to find a job, what I did after 5 months. So I arrived there to register. The priest asked, where is your father? I think he's dead. And then he said, where is your mother? I said, she's busy working. So, and I had the money. I just put the money in the counter, and I said, I want to register for the STEM program. He said, okay. And so I went to high school in another town, spent 3 years, a much bigger city. So graduated from high school there. Another big difference, in Brazil, you enter college by exam. So, but the difference in Brazil is not discrimination in entrance directly like here in the US, that people can see your application and you don't know if you are rejected because you are really stupid or because they don't like the color of your skin. The difference is that in Brazil, the people who have better financial conditions send their kids to the better high schools, and they have more knowledge to pass the college exam. So the discrimination is socioeconomical. It's not based on race, because we are all brown. For example, my great-grandfather was a slave, and from the other side, it was a native Brazilian Indian. But the other one was from Portugal, and the other half was from England. So when I arrived here, and they have all these boxes for me to fill, so I am African American, I am Brazilian Indian, and I am European. So I am a mixture of everything. So the boxes, anyway, after I went to college in this beautiful town here, and I was a very good student indeed, but I was also a rebellion. So this is my picture here, this second banner. This is me protesting for free elections in Brazil in 1983, and also protesting, for no fees in the college exam. And this is my roommate, who is here also, and she's also a professor today of engineering, geological engineering. So this is our school. And the thing about my college education is that I was the only woman studying engineering in my group. This is my graduating class. And here I am. And I didn't have any problems with the boys, but some of them had problems with me. Like when I passed physics, one guy said, you cannot work in mining because you are a woman. And that's true. In Brazil at that time, women could not work in underground mining. And I happened to be very good in underground mining. So he was right about it, except that I don't know where he is today, and I'm a professor of engineering today. So it didn't matter what he said. From there, I got a scholarship to go to Germany, study informatics for a year. I got a scholarship to the US 1 year later. I came to Montana with a scholarship from a Montana company. And from Montana, I was supposed to go to Brazil and work for that mining company, but they sold the company, and they released us, and my advisor helped me go to Penn State. And then from Penn State, after I finished, I moved to Nevada. I had been since 1997. I'm over 20 years in the faculty at UNLV. When I arrived here, we had 19,000 students, not 30,000 like today. President Harder was the president. She called me in her office and she said, my job is to make sure that the graduate program, PhD and Master in Engineering is running in 5 years. So that was my charge. And so I had to start the PhD program in water and water resources. And after 2 years, we hired one more person and it worked. We are number 88 in the US. So I'm very proud that we created a ranked program in the US. It was not very easy. Even from some of my colleagues, when I came, I was working very hard, many evenings, maybe not taking care of myself like my colleagues were suggesting. And my colleagues would come and say, you are working very hard. You know, you make us look bad. So you have to watch for these colleagues. Those are not the good ones. It's not because they were worried about my health. They were worried about what they are not doing and I'm doing. So you have to be careful about that. So I had a almost typical academic progress. Here at UNLV, you know, I am a full professor today. I was even a chair professor for 2 years. So the issue that I found in our department at that time, we were just 2 women. Now we are 4, 3, because one just retired. And the faculty always held us to higher standards. I saw my colleague's file being denied for 10 years, and you know, she eventually got it on with the faculty senate, but her file was excellent. And she basically was denied because they hated their guts. So as a woman in a place that's male dominated, my joke is I prefer to be the big bitch than to be the very nice women to all of them. And I wasn't nice all the time, and I don't have to be nice. So you just have to be competent. You know, I want to get along with my colleagues, and I get along with maybe 99%. But if there is 1 or 2 people, we had a chair that was very bad. The very chair, I almost left UNLV. I interviewed in San Antonio because of this guy. He would hold my proposals there for 2-3 days, not signing. He would not give my students any opportunities. He would make everything hard for me and my colleague. So one day he said, you know, here, that's at UNLV, believe it or not. So it was the annual evaluation. He said, my colleague just left the woman and she had slammed his door. So he already did something bad to her, and I was next. So he said, I want to advise you that you are spending too many hours with the students. You shouldn't be spending that much time. And I see the students in your office drinking tea with you all the time. And that's not a good thing, he said. You know, you are too close to the students. So I want to give you advice as if you were my sister. So as he said that, my blood boiled because I am a faculty member. I'm not his sister. And I am doing my annual evaluation. So I said, I'm sorry, my brother is 6'8", because this guy is very short. So this is the only day I was nasty. Most of the time I was nice, okay? Anyway, I had a normal career. This guy probably delayed me by about 1.5 years to get full professor because I spent a lot of time trying to get him fired, and I was successful at that. So my other colleagues don't have to suffer with him anymore. So that was a good thing. What are my recommendations for the graduate students? You know, and I didn't show you anything about my research because I think that's not important, but what comes out of it. The research is one area that I am also very excellent at. And that's why, you know, this chair was very jealous of me because, you know, 90% of my grants are always approved, you know, because I work hard at them. And I so happen to be good at getting grants approved. And, you know, and I work very hard at Penn State for that. I went through a lot of writing workshops and how to write grants. But instead of being happy, he was jealous. So be careful of the chairs that are jealous. They are not always your best friends. So you should be very careful when you get a job. If they are jealous of you, then it's very, very bad. But my recommendation to anyone who is in graduate school and wants to be a faculty member, no matter how hard it gets, always focus on the students. See, you think there is a conflict at first. You are trying to get tenure, so you have 5, 6, 7 graduate students. So you need to publish, you need to graduate the students. You have to have good teaching evaluations. The students also have to graduate. Okay, your PhD students also need to publish with you because they are looking for a job. But the difference between you and your student, your diploma is already hanging in your wall. And I show my students, all my diplomas are hanging in the wall. I said, you see, I have one, now you need one. You see, so you focus on the student. You know, I had a colleague that just this year, just in January, she asked me, you know, should I graduate this student? He only has a paper because I'm going up for 10 years. I said, no, one paper is too little for a PhD student. He needs one more semester. You already have a job. You are not going to lose your job if you have one paper less. This is my own opinion, but it works. Everything will follow if you focus on the student's graduation and progress. All the publications will come. If you graduate the students and you get your publications with that student, it will help you get the next grant. You already have your degree, you already have your job. Now you have to help your students. I know the first 5 years, this conflict was all the time in my head. But after 1 year, I decided, because I saw the equation, exactly the one I just explained to you. Everything will follow if your student graduates. The research is done, you get your papers. The students graduated, you mark, the students graduated, check. You taught all the classes to get all the students graduate, check. So everything checks if you focus on the student. Also, collaboration is very important, going out to all the departments. My research is water treatment, so it's interdisciplinary. You know, I work with biologists, with policymakers, chemists, everyone. So I went to all the departments, you know, I just introduced myself and told them what I do. I say, can I give a demonstration, a seminar in your department to show you what I do? So I didn't know anyone when I came here. And I asked my colleague to introduce me to the engineering community. And we had a joke, you know, because I was starting a new lab by myself. So I had jeans on all the time, you know, fixing the lab. And then I had a suit behind my door. So he would say, you know, there is a luncheon from the American Society of Forever today. So I would put my suit, and he said, the lipstick. I had a little mirror and lipstick. This is the best colleague. And then I would just put my lipstick. Okay, let's go. So there are great men, even in engineering, that's a male-dominated field. So it doesn't mean that all your colleagues have to be women. If you find, you know, I call this guy, I think you are better than any other woman because he's so a great colleague, you know. So there are great colleagues. So you want collaborators. Also promote your students, you know, put them up for awards, you know, talk to them about the importance of building the resumes, being in societies like this one that we are talking about today. And make sure that they know the expectations, you know, when you're a faculty member. You have to be a good teacher. You have to be, you know, a good researcher. You know, there are all these 3 boxes. You have to do service to your department, to the college. So they need to know what's expected from them. And you can do all this and help the minority students. I had 84, maybe now it's 92 from the last 1.5, yeah, 92 undergraduate students in my lab. 90% are minority. So one colleague one day said, oh, all students from JASI are women. I said, no. So I show him, indeed, I graduated just 40% women, but because I am the faculty has more women, he said, all my students are women. And then he said, oh, you don't have a lot of American students. Then I show him 70% of my students are American born. But because I have so many minority students, they perceive me as the minority faculty member. What's great, you know, but all my American students also love me, and they become advocates of minority students. After they know the other students and see how they have struggled to get where they are. But this is my advice: focus on the students, and focus on helping other minority students to get degrees. You have the power. So I get a grant, $500,000. I can hire 5 students. I can choose 2 minority students out of 5 who are qualified. So you have the power. Don't tell me you don't have the power. You can get more minority students, get degrees. After I graduated, all my sisters graduated. I'm now in my second phase of cousins and primos helping. I know how it works. I know how you get to college. I just hired a writer yesterday for my nephew who is going to do the college exam, medicine. You have to have 900 in writing. So he has to get there, and I'm paying him to help. So you can help the students. Okay, thank you. I will be able to answer questions when we get to the question phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Bautista. That was like a lot of information. Your path was just amazing. Where you've been, how you've gotten there, even with the struggles that you've had, especially with other colleagues. That's very inspirational. That's very something that that's real life experience that a lot of us are not able to get at this moment. Because, like, for example, I'm a master's student, so I'm doing I'm getting prepared to put myself in situations to make sure I have that luck of being successful. And that insight is very, very valuable. So thank you very much for your time and being here and that information. I'm really grateful for that. Now, continuing to our next speaker, we have Dr. Costas. Dr. Maria Raquel Costas is an associate professor in the Department of History at UNLV. Graduate with a PhD from Yale University in 1998, she became the 16th Mexican-American woman to ever receive a doctorate in history in the United States. She has taught at the University of Wisconsin-Madison as a visiting professor and is the author of Married to a Daughter of the Land: Inter-Ethnic Marriages in California from 1820 to 1880, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Press, 2007. She specializes in the 19th century California history, Spanish borderlands, and the history of people of color in the American West. She has taught undergraduate and graduate students at UNLV for 23 years and helped create the Latinx Studies program. Welcome, Dr. Casas, and you may have the floor.
Listening to all of this is just part of me is celebrating and enjoying that there are now more Latinas here at UNLV and professors who can give this information. And part of it is all the PTSD that graduate school will force on you. So my path, I was born in Mexico, Jerez, Zacatecas, well, a little colonia in Zacatecas. So, but my mother was born in the United States. So she was one of the generations that my grandparents immigrated to the United States because of the Mexican Revolution, had children here, but my mother was, during the Great Depression, likely asked to go back to Mexico. So she was raised in Mexico, but an American citizen. My father was born in Zacatecas, but he came over at the age of 16 as a bracero, and in fact came over 3 times as a bracero. So my family in some ways is very typical of how the border matters and doesn't. The fact that we have, my mother's family was, we had cousins in the United States, but having been born in Mexico, obviously Mexican. 1964, I was born in Mexico, but the economic situation for my parents was really bad. And my mother said, I'm a citizen. I think we need to go and find better economic situations. So she came back to the United States, established citizenry, and applied for green cards. And that is how that is how our family came over to the United States. 4 children, and because of my father's experience as a bracero, they became farm workers. 2 children were born in the United States, so I grew up in a family of 6, and we were farm workers. The best thing that ever happened was that my parents took us into the fields at the age of, I can remember being in the fields at the age of 3, 4, 5 and working. Because as a farm worker, the more you work, the more you get paid. And children become very economically viable because a 5-year, you can get a lot of work from a 5-year-old, especially if you use a chancla or a cinto. And so we had to work. But as children, we always knew where the money came from. When we asked for $5, we already knew that's three boxes of cherries, that's one bin of oranges. So we knew what money meant to my parents because we knew how they made it. So it was very hard, but it was one of the most valuable lessons because it was also what my parents used to say, if you don't want to do this for the rest of your lives like we have to do, then you better get an education. School was the escape from the realities of having to go to work. And so we loved school. I loved school because it meant I didn't have to go into the fields. So the other benefit that we had was also that my sister loved to teach. I can't remember the moment I couldn't read because my sister is 5 years older than I am, and she is a born teacher. And so she came over so kind of like Dr. Marun, she was 7 when she came over, didn't speak English. So she had that horrible experience of being and having to learn English. She took that experience and because she wanted to be a teacher, literally from the day she walked into school, she taught me how to read. I cannot remember a day in my life that I didn't know how to read. In fact, when I went to school, and they handed me the book, they said, well, here. And I said, well, I've already read it. And they handed me a second grade book. I've already read it because my sister had taught me how to read from her school books. And those were the school books that the teacher was giving me. So because of and I'm the 4th child of 6. So because Imelda loved school, Arthur loved school, Henry loved school, I love school. And because we were always, there was always one sibling ahead of us, the school knew us as a family and us as a family that were great students. So I never walked into school saying, I could take time off or I had to be as good as my brothers and sisters because I was always their brothers and sisters. So it was a small community. I grew up in a little town called Farmersville, California. When I was growing up, it was probably 6,000 people. And the majority of the people were farm workers. So I knew who I was. I was Mexican. I was a farm worker, but I was a Casas. And that's how I went through. Farmersville was so poor that they didn't have a high school. So in order to go to high school, we had to go to the neighboring town, which was Exeter, Union, Exeter. They're the towns of the farm owners. So when the Farmersville kids would go to Exeter, it was a battle between Exeter and Farmersville. And Farmersville, farm workers, Exeter, farm owners. The best thing about it was because they were rich, they had a great public high school. And I got one of the best public educations because of that. But I had to fight in order because all the Farmersville kids were put into remedial classes and told you're not going to excel. You're just farm workers. So my sister, when they put me, because when I went to high school, she made sure that I went in the college prep courses. So beginning my freshman year, because she was going to go to college. So if she was going to go to college and Arthur was going to go to college and Henry was going to go to college, I was going to go to college. Oh, and notice the names. One of the things that in kindergarten, our names got changed. I became Rachel. Arturo became Arthur. Henry became Henry. So we grew up with these anglicized names because that's just the way it was. So, and that'll be important later on. So again, because my sister wanted to go to college, we all wanted to go to college. So we took college prep. But we again graduated. Fresno State was the closest and the most economical. And when you have 4 kids going off to college at the same time, my other 3 brothers and sisters went to the community college in Visalia. But when I graduated, we all went to Fresno State because it was the cheapest and it was going to give us a college education. It was good enough. And especially my older Henry and I, we were in the GATE program, so we probably could have gotten someplace else, but just family economics. We could all live together, and we did, and we could economize, and we did, and that's how we went to college. But in college, that's where I had always loved history, and as in my sophomore year, I remember the moment I had been taking some history courses and loving it, and I just remember the professor, white man, coming in and said, starting to teach Russian history, by the way. And I said, if he can do it, why can't I? And I went to a professor, a white man, and said, I want to be a college professor. And he didn't laugh. And he didn't say, no, you're Mexican, you're a woman, Dr. Bjork. Okay, but you're going to have to go to grad school. And that's the first time I had ever heard about grad school. And talk about being lied to, Norma. Oh, if he had told me the truth, I wouldn't have done it. But he said, okay, let's go. You're a good student. I'm going to support you. And the department took me and they supported me because I was smart and I had they saw it, I could do it. So I go off, I'm the star history student at Fresno State. I applied to grad school, and Henry had applied, he was a geologist, and he had gone into Binghamton, SUNY Binghamton. And I had applied to all these schools, and Cornell had accepted me to their master's program. And my mother, and I gotten accepted into other, but it was, and she said, okay, so where's Cornell and where's Binghamton? They're an hour and a half away. Okay, you're going to go to Cornell because I don't want you to be away from. We were very close as a family, so she said, okay, that's close enough. You guys can be together. I mean, she didn't like it, but she let me go, and that to her credit, she let me go. And so I went to Cornell, and I went from California to Ithaca, New York. And it was the most miserable time of my life. The first year semester of your grad school is hell on earth. I'm not afraid of the devil. I'm not. I've been to grad school. What more can you do to me? What more can you do to me to make me feel lower, dumber, afraid for the rest of my life? So eternity, I just have to remember that first semester of grad school because it was awful. I was away from my family. I was in snow and cold like you couldn't believe. And I wanted to go home every single day. And then I get there and I'm not, Fresno State didn't prepare me. My teachers loved me at Fresno State, but they didn't prepare me. And for the first time, I am competing with people that have gone to Ivy Leagues. I'm competing with kids whose parents are millionaires and who have given them everything. So I survived. It was hard, but I wanted it so much. And that first year I survived, and I'm thinking, okay, if I want to teach, which is what I wanted to do, I have to get a PhD. So if I go, but I have to apply to the program at Cornell for a PhD. And so I go to the professor that I wanted to teach, who I wanted to be my mentor, the person who taught cultural history. And at that point, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I walked into his office and I said, I would like to apply to the PhD. Would you support me? And he looked at me and he said, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. I don't think you're capable of completing a PhD at Cornell. You need to go to a second tier university. And I believed him. For the first time in my life, I was told I was dumb and I wasn't smart enough. And it killed me. It ripped my heart out. And I believed him, but I had been accepted at UCSB. And I had gotten this wonderful letter from Mario Garcia saying that he wanted to be my mentor. And so I wrote him and said, you know, I'm here at Cornell. I would like to go home, and he said yes. And so I got a fellowship from UC Santa Barbara, working with Mario Garcia, who was one of the foremost Chicano historians in the country. But UCSB was a second tier compared to the Ivies. But guess what? I didn't care. I was going home. I was going to be close enough to my family, and I was happy. So again, at that point, thinking, okay, I'm not capable of being in the, that's fine. I just wanted a job. I was going to get a PhD from UC Santa Barbara and teach in California, be with my family. What more could I want? I had a studio apartment 15 minutes from the beach. I could walk to the beach every day in Santa Barbara. Woohoo! I'm learning the Chicano historians. They're all men, but at least they're Chicano. At least they understand things. We had, for the first time, because guess what? There was no people of color at Cornell. I was the only dark person in that room. So go back. There's now a community of Chicano graduate students. That's when I become Raquel, because a fantastic grad student, Jeffrey Garcilaso, looks at me and goes, why do you call yourself Rachel? And I said, well, that's what I was like, you're Raquel. That's right, I'm Raquel. And I'm going to become a Chicana historian. And I'm going to teach it in California. I'm going to have my family with me. Life is getting better. Then life throws me a curve. Mario Garcia gets appointed to Yale University. I'm still taking courses, and it's like, ah, crap. And Jeff looks at me and says, you got to go and say you still want to work with him. And it's like, but I have to go back and leave my family. And he's like, what do you want? How much do you want it? And I wanted it. I want to be a professor. I want to help other women of color, especially, but to understand the diversity of, it's not just about race, it's also about class. So it's like, okay. And I told him, you know, what about me? And he said, okay, apply. If you get in, you get in. I applied, he supported me. So now I have to pack my bags and go back to Connecticut. There were people of color at Yale, but there was another Latino whose father was a gynecologist, so he grew up with Mexican servants. So, you know, Chicano, but Chicano, and not the way I was. So anyway, so there was the community I found at Yale were gay men. Loved gay men because they accepted me. They accepted me in ways that other Latinos did not, because they were upper class. I'm the best cherry picker Yale has ever accepted in its history. That's what I want to put on my grave. Gay men, okay, not cherry pickers, but we understand how you feel, that you don't belong. So that imposter syndrome is strong. But guess what? Everybody has it, even white men. They do. It's the nature, like it's the nature of grad school. It will transform you, and you have to recognize that path through grad school will change you at a personal level. So Yale thinks I'm good enough. The most shocking thing, I thought they thought I was actually I fit in. I they didn't challenge me as a woman or as a minority. It was just, okay, if you go learn. And I learned to like it. And I finally had community, not Latinos. Gay men and African Americans actually were my strongest supporters. You have to learn to make community where you find it. It's not going to be built in. You're going to have to leave what you find comfortable, and you have to make community where you find it. And sometimes white men are going to be your biggest supporters. The men in the history department thought I was smart enough. So again, one white man at Cornell, you're not smart enough. At Yale. So I managed to get through the coursework, come back to California to do my research. I got a one-year appointment at Madison. And then I'm ABD working at Starbucks because the funding ran out at Yale, and I am holding on by a thread. And UNLV calls me up and says, would you apply? I'm ABD at that point, but I apply and I come here. And I start, oh God. So when I got here, there were, I think, 3 people in the liberal arts college that were Latino. Marta Mayana and I came together. Then the next year, Vincent Perez. But there, just like in grad school, the professorate was so unrepresentative of this, and we already knew, you could already see the Latino students are going to be an important part of UNLV. So we needed a faculty, and so that for me, the challenge wasn't just doing my research and becoming an assistant professorship. It was also about supporting other, especially Latino faculty members, and building that infrastructure that still isn't there. UNLV has gotten away with promoting itself as a minority serving institution. We're a minority enrolled institution, so don't kid yourself. And they do not still want to build the infrastructure we need in order to build the bridges that we need in order to support students. So I managed to get tenure, and again, and I survived. In listening to these stories, because of when I got my PhD, what it taught me is to be a survivor, which is sad, really, because I don't know when my community is going to be taken away from me and when it's going to be built up. So I have to survive. And that means putting on armor every single day I walk onto campus. Every single day I have to put on my shield, grab my spear, say, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fight. And it's sad that at all this time that is how I have to think of myself. But lately I have been thinking of myself not as a warrior, but as a bridge. The fantastic book called Gloria and Saldua, The Bridge That Caught My Back. And now what's most important to me is not where I have started or where I'm going to end, because I'm supposed to be thinking about becoming a full professor. No, I need to become the bridge for these young women who are assistant professors and associate professors. I have to think of my students who I want to be the bridge to them getting their degree. And Dr. Bautista is right. You always have to put forth your students and the bigger picture of how do you build the community. If you did not have it at the beginning, then what are you doing to help build it? So this association is fantastic and I support it, and I would actually like to contribute because I think Cassandra makes a very important point about having the ability to create the community you want, not the community that UNLV wants to create and wants to appropriate and use as PR to say, oh, look at all the things we do when it's your labor that is going to get that success. So I would love to contribute, and I think every year, especially the female Latina professors, if we can contribute $50 to this organization, that gives you the independence and freedom to do the programming you want to do, to give you the ability to think about yourselves as a community in different ways. So if $50 a year or $100 a year helps you guys, sign me up, because it matters. It's those bridge building activities that will help the most students get to where we are, because it has been lonely, it has been frustrating, but at least there's hope. When I see the number of students and the number of women who want to become academics, that's why I'm here. So it's not about me, it's about you and what can I do to help you. And so this community, this organization will be critical, because it's not going to be 5 years from now, but 15 years from now, you're going to see who was a member of this group, and they're going to be doctors, they're going to be professors, they're going to be assistant, associate, they're going to be who we need them to be. So that's my consejo is, I'll share with you the mantra that got me through grad school. I will quit tomorrow, but I'm not going to quit today. If you tell yourself that, you'll get through. So that's my final consejo.
Thank you, Dr. Casas. That was very inspirational. And, it's something that we, as like the Latino community, I've noticed as well, that we have the stigma of we are hard workers, but we're like they say, we're dumb. Like, we don't know this. We don't know how to do that. So that's like, but we need that, just that, I guess I could say that confidence, the confidence within ourselves as well, and that person to help us to achieve our goals and to change the stigma that's saying, yeah, we are hardworking, but also we're very studious. So trust us, we're gonna handle this. So thank you for your journey and going that, because I know that's a lot of information as well, and I appreciate you opening your heart to it, because we can hear the passion in your voice. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. Now, continuing with this, the speaker series, we do have, we want to continue and first thank all the panelists for sharing all your experiences. And also now, if you do not mind, we would like to dive into the question and answers portion, the Q&A. And remember, for anybody that's on here, send me questions directly to avoid clutter in the chat box. And like that, we can read the questions, and we'll be able to have that going for you. And actually, right now, we just have an amazing question. Let's see. Let me see. Let me open this up real quick. Okay, so the first question we have here is for Dr. Rodriguez. It's like quite often many first-generation students find themselves having to explain to their families exactly what a graduate school is, what a thesis or dissertation is, and what a large time commitment these things usually take. So Dr. Rodriguez, do you mind talking a little bit about how to balance family life and school responsibilities?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's an important one. I don't know if I have tips so much as what I could impart was my experience. I would tell the story of what it's like being in grad school, what it's like to do a dissertation, or what the job market is, what tenure track is. These are things that I would tell my parents about, especially my dad and my grandparents. And I think that it's just a matter of invite them in as much as you'd like, and know that maybe you're going to explain it more than once, maybe often actually. One thing I know sometimes it was kind of difficult to explain or to communicate that there's no set timeline. So often I think families or parents who are not familiar with this process, and again, we're first generation, we don't know either, really. We're learning too. They want to know when you're going to be done, right? And so that's why sometimes I think of this as, well, maybe we're grad students, but we're in training, because there is not necessarily a set timeline. We're done when that dissertation is done, and depending on the type of dissertation or data we're collecting, we don't know what that's going to be, right? In some ways, we have not as much control of it as we'd like. So I would just constantly try to explain that process. And one thing that I started to do later on is explain through examples what my career could offer me. Because the other concern was, my father was particularly concerned about my earning potential. And a few years into graduate school, I had already put in 3-4 years, and he asked me, why don't you go into nursing? And I was like, what? This is pretty late in the game to be making this suggestion. So, but anyway, what I did was I thought, well, look, sometimes on Univision, which is Spanish language channel, so, sometimes they have experts, people with their doctorates come in and then they give expert opinions on immigration policies, or they talk about healthcare policies and they invite them to do that. I'm like, that's the kind of thing I would like to do with my degree, and that's possible with this education. Or when things would come up like, oh, papi, I'm getting invited to do a talk in this part of the country, and they're going to pay me to share my expertise, like that. Those are like real world examples to show what we are doing, as opposed to, oh, I have to do this writing on the dissertation, I have to figure out my argument, this and that. Maybe they don't want to hear the nuts and bolts, maybe. So in terms of, balancing family and so there's that, and also setting your boundaries for what makes sense for you. For some people, I know there is very little discussion of what their grad school experiences looks like with their parents. And for some, it's constant conversation. And I know for me, I often, when I went back to California, it was really hard to explain that I couldn't always be there for things, even though I was back home, or I wasn't living at home. I was living a little further away, but close enough to obviously visit. And I had to kind of set boundaries and say, I'm really trying to get this dissertation done. I'm away sometimes doing interviews or doing participant observation stuff, and I couldn't really visit that much. And so set the boundaries that make sense for you and your family, and that's sort of the best that I can offer. And it's also, I think, one thing is maybe your families of origin, your parents, your siblings, and then with romantic relationships, that's a whole other thing. So again, boundaries, communication, and know that the grad school experience can be really hard on romantic relationships, really, really, really hard, and just balance it as you can. In that first year of graduate school, a lot of the people in my cohort were in serious long-term relationships, some of them married, and there was a time a few months in, this was like the start of the second semester, where everybody's relationship ended. And we were all just, it was like Valentine's, and there was like 6 of us on a table, and all of our relationships had just ended. And so again, like this goes back to my consejo about find your people, find your community, because and I think Dr. Maroon had said this too, right? You need that person to call when your relationship goes wrong, or when you need that sort of mental health support. So those are some of my thoughts for now.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Rodriguez. We have one more question that we're gonna pose to everyone on the panel, and I think it's extremely important, especially with how the job market may be right now. So what are your recommendations for getting a postdoc position?
I don't know if there are many students here who are in STEM. Depending on the area of STEM, postdoc is not very common. We go straight, like I didn't do any postdoc. You can find a job straight from your PhD. But there are, in some areas, even in civil engineering now, you have to do postdoc. The best way is to get at least 2 or 3 publications before you graduate, because with people who hire postdoc, they want you to lead the PhD students because they are very busy, and they want you to write papers. So you have to demonstrate, at least in STEM, that you can write the papers and that you can also help them write grants. In STEM, in engineering, when we hire postdoc, or when I have postdocs, I want them to help me with the PhD students when I'm very busy, and I want them to write papers and write proposals. So you have to have some papers written to find a postdoc. If you don't have any, I think it will be very hard.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer, Dr. Bautista. Now, we appreciate everybody's time. So we just want to thank all the panelists and everybody who attended today for sharing such valuable information. And also, I would like to end by acknowledging our campus community resources. The first being the graduate college themselves, UNLV Comadres. And UNLV Comadres, if you don't know, it's an interdisciplinary Latinx graduate student organization open to all graduate students who identify as Latinx, Mujeres, and non-binary Latinx. Also, the Intersection, and the Intersection is a UNLV multicultural resource center geared towards helping first-generation students of color navigate through higher education. So, just these are some resources we do have on campus. So, if you want to look more into it, please email us or let us know. Also, another acknowledgement of a new association in the works named the Latinx Graduate Student Association, or the LGSA for short. Currently, we are seeking graduate students that might be interested in meeting as we discuss the association's visions, missions, and ideas. Please share your contact information with me if you would like to be part of the new association. I will add my email to the chat box before it ends. But if we, just for social media, when we post these videos, my email will be irwin.barcenes, barcenes@unlv.edu. Once again, thank you to all the panelists for answering those questions and giving us a dive into your journey of what you experienced. I would also like to thank everyone for the participation, and I hope everyone took something away from today's speakers. We would also like to cordially invite you to our next event titled The Politics of Ineligibility, Belonging is in Fashion, in which we will have Dr. Clelia Rodriguez from the Department of Curriculum, Teaching and Learning from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto, speaking with us about her experiences, and then diving into decolonizing academia, and finally opening the floor for Q&A. We hope to see y'all there, and once again, thank you very much, and have a beautiful day.
Erwin, I was just gonna say, I know if people have questions, I can stick around for like 10 more minutes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
so 10, 15 minutes. I know because there were some questions there. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I will, yeah, we can go ahead and do that. I'll ask the next question. Let me see here. So Juanita Hinojosa asked, is there statistics for failed romantic relationships in grad school? So anybody want to answer that?
Actually, there aren't any statistics, but when I was going through grad school, there was a study that showed that the ethnic group that had that if you were going to become an academic and you were a Latina, you had like a 10% chance of being married and having children. And that was my case. I had to make a choice. When you talk about balance, I had to, like, be a good daughter, a good academic, a good sister, or a good mother. And since I only knew the first three, I chose not to become a mother because I didn't know if I was going to be able to be a good mother and a good everything else. So for Latinas, that balance you guys have to think about what it is that you really want. If you want to be a mother, an academic, and you want to be it all, well, you're going to have to work even harder. And for me, the easiest choice was saying, because I worked so hard to get this PhD, because I wanted to be a scholar first and foremost, I chose not to be a mother. And that's a hard choice to make as a Latina, but it's the one that made sense to me. I hope it isn't the one you have to make now, but you have to recognize how much this takes from certain women, given all of the cultural class issues that they come in through into this journey. So I don't know if there's a study on it, but again, when I was going, I just remember reading that article and saying, oh my God, that's going to be me. And I became that. I hope it isn't for you, but you're gonna have to make certain sacrifices if this is what you want.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Anybody else wants to add to that, or we can move on to the next question?
One thing I'll just add to that real quick is that, depending on what you study, at least you go into these family decisions really informed, right? Mm-hmm. So like in sociology, we know a lot of people study the wage penalties that mothers face in the professional workforce, for example. And so it's like whatever you decide, you also have a lot of information at your disposal to figure out, okay, what would my workload, my housework load, my childcare load look like, and also what would it cost? And so, I mean, I think whatever you decide, at least you're a little bit informed with the research you encounter, maybe in your field. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Let me see another question. Let me pull it up real quick. Is to all the panelists, what positive experiences unique to only Latinx student slash professors should students take away from today's presentation that they can use to be inspired?
Oh, I like this question because there was other consejos that I didn't touch on, and one of them was owning your voice and the power of your voice. So I know that initially when the panelists were thinking about this talk, there was going to be maybe a question about what it's like being the only one in your department or cohort. And, you know, sometimes when I'm in a room where I am the only Latinx person or the only woman or the only person of color, I mean, it's not something we necessarily want to get used to, and maybe we want to work to change that, right? But at the same time, I often feel, wow, it is really important that I'm in this space and that I can bring perspectives in the space that are not here, or even in the research, right? You know, I think we're asking questions that other people are not asking. And we have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of insights. You know, we're looking at things that, you know, need to be part of our knowledge base, right? Need to be in the books, need to be in our classrooms, need to be read by our students. And so the positive or the power in Latinx, I guess, professors or academics is, I think we have really important things to say. I think we're really, you know, smart and bring with us a lot of family histories and teachings, and, you know, like I think now Dr. Marun's research, dichos or consejos or sayings that really inform and improve our thinking and our teaching and our research. So there's value in owning our voice and in our perspectives.
And Dr. Rodriguez, I actually love that you said that, because something that I've experienced and I've seen like my friends experience that are very Latino, Latinx, Latinas, that parents, you know, usually growing up, they're like, oh, don't ask that, just do it, just ignore it, or do this. So I feel like we've created this thing of being afraid to ask questions. And it took me a while to actually learn, say, you know what, what's the worst case? No, or the answer I don't want, but that's okay. It's okay not to do that, because you're still learning, you're still progressing, you're still growing. So I love that you mentioned that. That's so valuable, because I've been able to do so many things just because of that. And let me see. We have another question. We'll probably have time. Does everybody have time for probably one more question?
Well, maybe the three students or the three who are here, maybe do they have a question? If not,
yeah, Brianne, Yasmin, or Hank, just unmute yourself if you like, or put it on the chat.
Everyone, I'm just listening and taking it all in. I really appreciate this topic today, and I love learning from you all and hearing about your experiences.
cool.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I'll leave it to the students to ask questions though.
Yes.
I have a question. This is Jasmine.
Yes. Hello. Go ahead.
My question is for anybody that can give me some advice on this. For our dissertations, what tips do you guys have you gals, for approaching, having this discussion with our advisors when they have a topic in mind for this work, this big body of work?
Jasmine, do you mean like if they don't support your topic?
Well, if they have like a topic in mind that they want to push for you to do, how do you approach them to tell them that maybe you want to work on something maybe similar, or maybe a little go in a different direction? How do you approach them without like offending them?
I mean, I would say, you know, let them know, like, this is really important to me, and explaining why. And if they don't support it, find a new advisor.
The way I would go about it is, oh yeah, but remember what you start off with and what you end up with can be something very different. So if they say, okay, go, so if they're pushing you into a certain field, say, okay, well, if it's a field that you totally do not want to get into or enter, then you need to find another mentor. Now, if it's a field that you have you might have an interest in, or you might be able to craft your particular project out of, then you say, okay, let me start investigating. And then as you do as you start thinking about a project you want to do, then you go back to your mentor and say, okay, this is, you said you wanted me to study this field. That's great, but I want to study this specific aspect of that field that I find more interesting, and this is the dissertation I want to write. Again, if they're still resistant, that's not a good relationship. I think you need to start thinking of asking yourself, is this being a mentor is like it's a long-term relationship. So you have to think, is this the relationship you want to continue with for the next few years, or do you need to find it? Do you need a new relationship in your life?
Okay, thank you.
What program are you in?
I'm in computer science.
Ooh. Okay.
But I think I really like what you said, because the topic is still very broad and we haven't started work on it. So I think I need to go with that mindset and say, I want to focus on this particular subtopic, even though, you know, your interests are these, and I need to see how I can merge my interests with your interests.
And open it up, and because it's going to be a conversation that you're developing with your field and your mentor. So if he is interested in a broader, and I'm saying a he, right? If he is interested in this broad field, again, how can you craft a project that is really, really central to who you as a scholar want to be? Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for those. Thank you for the answers, everybody. Hank, I don't know if you'd like to ask one more question. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you hopefully in the next event.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.